Hello and welcome to our webcast for March 16, 2018. My name is Christian Debré and this is Amy Asbrook, the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet.
Hello.
And also joining us is Taylor Ayat, our policy analysis and outreach coordinator. Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet is a non-religious organization by and for people with disabilities and our allies. Our goal is to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminates against people with disabilities. Today's topics, we have three this week.
Busy week.
Yeah. News flash. An Ontario man files lawsuits demanding self-directed home care instead of assisted suicide. Great news.
Yeah.
Second one is disability, stereotypes, and assisted suicide part 2. And the third one is assisted suicide and euthanasia in Canadian prisons.
Okay.
So to help you with it, Amy Asbrook.
Okay, so CTV News is reporting that a 42-year-old man, 42-year-old London, Ontario man, Roger Foley, has filed suit in Ontario Superior Court against the Attorneys General of Ontario and Canada, as well as several health and social service agencies, asking for self-directed home care services. Foley was hospitalized 2 years ago after home health aides furnished by providers contracted by the local health integration network, LHIN, endangered his life and health on multiple occasions. His application for Ontario's self-directed personal support services program was denied, and administrative delays have stalled the appeal of his denial.
And if you remember, it costs lots less to the government to keep people at home than to take it to
live in a hospital.
Any kind of institution.
Yeah. And what he's saying he talks a little bit about this, but basically what he's saying is that the home health aides that he had, one of them fed him food that was gave him food poisoning because it had been sitting out too long. One of them, a lot of them left the burners on. One of them started a fire. He was injured while being transferred. All this stuff that happened, and he filed complaints, but nothing was ever done. And they sent the same people who had given him problems before.
Yeah.
So basically, he ended up in the hospital, and they're saying, well, either you have to go home or we're going to give you assisted suicide, but that's your choice. And
remember, this is not a free choice.
Right, exactly. So the complaint claims that the Victoria Hospital and the LHIN violated Mr. Foley's charter rights to life, liberty, and security of the person when they met with Mr. Foley to discuss contemporaneous forced discharge or medical assistance in dying as options for him without providing Mr. Foley with any support for a safe and available self-directed assisted care option that would substantially alleviate his irremediable and intolerable suffering. So basically, he's having a hard time, and the options they're giving him are either you go home to a bad home care situation or you get assisted suicide.
Yeah, and with the same people who tried to kill him.
Exactly. And what he's talking about, self-directed care, is that the government would give him money and he would be the employer. He would hire people that he interviewed and whatever that word is.
He would vet them.
Yeah, basically.
And remember, it's possible USA did it.
Yeah, lots of countries have this program, and there's really no reason not to. But he wants to have the system where he employs the people, and if they don't do their job, he can fire them.
Yeah.
So that's the situation. And so for more information,
that's an empowerment of himself over the situation.
Right, exactly. For more information, visit assistedlife.ca is the website, and he has a video there. You can download the complaint that he filed in Ontario Superior Court, and there's lots of information. So this is a really exciting case, because this is what we've wanted. This kind of case is what we've wanted for a long time. Somebody saying assisted suicide is not the answer. Self-directed home care services is the answer, and that's what people deserve.
And we fully agree.
Yeah. You want to add anything, Taylor?
One thing that I'll be watching is how will the courts respond to his. Basically, he says that suicide and assisted suicide are the same thing. And I feel like someone at the court level is going to have an issue with that. He's gotten his facts wrong.
Right, exactly. Because that was something in the Carter case, the court said, essentially, assisted suicide isn't the same thing as suicide. And that kind of thinking spilled over into the statute that was created afterwards. Okay, disability stereotypes and assisted suicide. So we're continuing our discussion on disability and stereotypes by looking at the effect that stereotypes on assisted suicide and euthanasia, or ASE. Last week, we examined common media images of disabled people as dependent, bitter and self-pitying, evil, freakish, or as super cripples. In their 2007 article examining 18 films where the central character has a disability, Rhonda S. Black and Lori Pretz add the better dead than disabled stereotype to that list. And, because they were looking like whose life is it anyway, $1 Million Baby, that kind of thing. So that's where they were coming from. Movies like Me Before You and $1 Million Baby show characters rejecting their newly acquired disability identity. In these alternate universes, there is no such thing as independent living, accessible environments, disability rights, or other disabled people who are satisfied with their lives. A cure or death are the only acceptable options.
Okay, and the keyword is newly, because the grief was not done yet.
Okay. The mourning process is not finished.
Okay, so it's very important.
Yeah, exactly. And they make it so that they don't deal with the fact that the limitations of the social services make it so people don't have control over their lives, and all they chalk it up to is the disability itself. Since a cure is not possible, the newly disabled person can only escape the horror of disability through death. Anyone who tries to discourage their self-destruction is considered a busybody who cannot possibly understand the character's hopeless situation. And so anybody who tries to discourage them, they're just jerks.
We are both disabled, and we are not hopeless, and we live a very nice life.
Right, exactly. These films portray disability as causing dependence, misery, and deprivation of autonomy, whereas these problems are really caused by public policies, prejudice, and external barriers. Without necessary emotional support and other resources, suicide is shown as a reasonable response to disability, even though it's still shocking enough to attract viewers.
Oh, yeah.
So it's used as a way to get people to come and see the movie, but it's also sort of shocking the way they use it.
Yeah, it is.
When these characters choose to die, they are held up as examples of courage and determination. They are supposedly making a free choice with no obstacles or constraints, using their willpower to overrule those who oppose their decision for selfish or arbitrary reasons. So they're acting determined and heroic and making this decision, and they're defying the odds of people who are in their way, blah, 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 blah.
But in the real life, it's not happening like that.
Well, in reality, people give up a lot of control.
Yeah.
They're not taking control, they're giving up control. Because we'll explain that in a minute, but basically you're giving over control. News coverage of people who want to end their lives, like Gloria Taylor, feisty and determined, described as heroic, Brittany Maynard and Jerica Boland, look similar to those fictitious scenarios. Ms. Maynard was called courageous, and Ms. Boland's hopes for freedom were widely publicized. The better dead than disabled stereotype is a variation on inspiration porn with a touch of tragedy. Instead of being praised for ordinary activities like going grocery shopping, disabled people seeking death become heroes by fighting a cruel society that won't allow a peaceful end to their suffering. And that's, supposedly what people are asking for. And if you look at the complaints in the Lamb case and in the case in Quebec, that's the kind of language you hear, but that's not the language you hear in the complaint from this new case, Mr. Foley's case, where he's basically saying, I want assistance to live, not to die.
Yeah.
Sometimes assisted suicide and euthanasia are portrayed as a sacrifice for loved ones to relieve them of the burden of care and witnessing the person's decline. There are a couple of problems with this. First, ending one's life should not be considered an intentional act of kindness toward another. And second of all, giving control over the conditions of their deaths to some people opens the door to coercion of others. And that's not a good situation.
Not at all.
There are many myths about medical killing sold by the better dead than disabled stereotype. People are not forced to continue living. Whether assisted suicide and euthanasia are legal or not, disabled people can and do commit suicide.
Yeah, if somebody really wants to die,
right, they're gonna figure out a way to do it.
There's no way to let's say, not permitted, and it's not illegal to suicide. It is not a right, but it's not illegal.
Yeah. The better dead than disabled person says, my existence is unbearable, so I'm taking control of my life. But in fact, the person must give control to legislators to establish criteria for who is eligible, to doctors to decide if they fit the eligibility criteria, to a pharmacist to dispense the drug, and in the case of euthanasia, which is what most people in Canada choose, to another doctor to provide the lethal injection. The better off dead stereotype carries warped expectations, as summarized by Donald Lowe in his posthumous plea for legalization of assisted suicide and euthanasia, when he said, you drink a cocktail and you fall asleep, and you do this in the presence of your family. Right.
Lovely, soft presence.
Right. Right.
That's not really happening like that.
Right.
Exactly. In reality, sometimes there is even a fight over the bed of the dying
person. Yeah. Assisted suicide and euthanasia does not guarantee that death will be peaceful and free of complications. Oftentimes people have an allergic reaction or some kind of reaction to the medication. If they do assisted suicide and take it themselves. Often they'll vomit the medication up and they won't have a full dosage, and they'll, get sick. And
even if it's done by a doctor, like
Right.
it is in a prison in USA,
right,
sometimes there
There
is
are problems.
bad situation,
Right.
and it is not always peaceful.
right, people go into convulsions. They don't die. They go into convulsions, and it's
Yeah.
a bad situation. Also, it does not mean that the family and friends will be present in your last moments and that the atmosphere will be loving and harmonious.
Yeah.
I mean, when my mom died, we were all there and it was mostly nice, but one of my sisters provoked a fight, while we were in the room with my mother, and my mother's going, So,
It's not always peaceful.
right. Dying by lethal injection is not drifting off to sleep. It's dying.
It's not the riders going face on the
Right, riding off into the sunset.
sun.
Yeah.
No, not always like that.
Like death with dignity, these are euphemisms meant to hide the reality of assisted suicide and euthanasia. Besides being cheesy and sentimental, saying the procedure leads to sleep is just not true. Death is permanent. The person won't be able to feel the release promised by assisted suicide and euthanasia promoters because they won't exist to feel anything.
Yeah, that's it.
Another stereotype emerges from news accounts of devoted elderly spouses who die within hours of each other. The loving husband who releases his wife from a painful illness by helping her die. Murder, suicide, or suicide pacts.
Just remember Romeo and Juliet.
Right. All offered as the pinnacle of romantic love. However, researchers have found that behind such events often lurks a history of domestic violence, and romantic portrayals in the press can encourage suicide contagion.
You just have to remember a bit Romeo and Juliet. Both families have some pressure over
Yeah.
Romeo and Juliet,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
I remember well.
exactly. So, Taylor, did you want to talk a little bit about the coverage of death?
Finally, I've been chomping at the bit to rant about this all week. I've seen two different cartoons going around. One shows him getting out of his wheelchair and walking amongst the stars that he loved. It's another portrayal of disability as something awful that he had to be freed from in the afterlife. And it's a disservice to who he was, considering he didn't believe in an afterlife.
Yeah.
I much prefer the one with him in his wheelchair at the bottom of the stairway to heaven going, "Oh shit, I can't get in." Thank you, Stephen Drake, for pointing that one out. And Professor Hawking himself said that his condition was a good thing. It gave him more time to think. Thanks to Lawrence Carter Long for pointing me in the direction of that one. And so many of the reports on people reacting to his death, people are complaining because they're calling him an inspiration and saying other ableist things. The reporters are putting ableist in quotes as if it's a word we just made up last week. You wouldn't do that to the word racist, so knock it off.
Exactly. And one thing I noticed actually is a lot of the photos they're using of him are when he was very young and didn't look quite so disabled. Certainly a lot more than half the photos, or about half the photos, which doesn't really make sense because he was in his 70s when he died. And if you think about other, artists, they don't, half of the photos they show of the artist aren't from, 50 years ago. So it's strange. It's strange. All right. We pointed out last week that stereotypes exist in part to maintain the social order. We are now facing an evolving social order where the where the quality of life with a disability is diminished by poverty, isolation, and forced institutionalization, and then labeled as unbearable. Activists who challenge this system, like J.J. Hansen, are not recognized for their efforts. Anyone who lives with a disability or illness after having been quote unquote normal risks being called undignified. On the other hand, people who seek death are praised and celebrated, like Brittany Maynard.
Which is not the truth, because dignity came with your life.
Right, and the point I was making there is that Brittany Maynard and J.J. Hansen had the exact same kind of cancer. And because J.J. Hansen, opposed assisted suicide and fought legalization, he didn't get all the lovey-dovey media coverage that Brittany Maynard got when she said she was going to kill herself. So I think that says an awful lot.
Kara Tippett's too. There was a young mom in the States about the same age as Ms. Maynard who wrote her an open letter going, please don't do this to yourself. You can have this time to make memories with the ones you love. And did she get any attention? Nope.
Right. This is a new kind. These are a new kind of hero who acknowledges that they are better dead than disabled. And the question is, what does that say about our society, that we're creating these heroes?
Not really a very nice viewing of our society.
No. Taylor, did you want to add anything before we move on to the third topic?
No, I think we can go straight to the next one.
Okay, our third topic, CBC story on assisted suicide in Canadian prisons. At the end of February, CBC News published a story on access to assisted suicide in Canadian prisons after an inmate in a federal prison became the first to die by euthanasia. So we don't have the death penalty, but we have euthanasia in prison.
Yeah. It's something bizarre.
Right. We don't have the death penalty because we wouldn't want an innocent person to be killed. But we have euthanasia, despite the fact that we know some people who are not eligible are being killed. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, then. Applications made by three other people have been approved, but not carried out. None of the responses to the story have come from a disability rights point of view, so we thought we would bring it up. Ivan Zinger, investigator for Correctional Services Canada, the body overseeing Canada's federal prisons, wrote a letter to the organization's acting commissioner saying that guidelines allowing assisted suicide in prisons, quote, breach the system's legal and ethical obligations, unquote. He proposed that terminally ill prisoners should instead be given conditional release on humanitarian and compassionate grounds.
I feel that this is better.
Right.
Mr. Zinger, tell the truth.
Yeah, and one of the goals of putting people in prison is to prevent them from doing it again, whatever it was that they did. Well, if somebody's dying, they're not likely to commit the same crime again. So that reason for punishment is eliminated. And so it doesn't make sense to keep them in prison while they're in the dying process.
Reminds me of the man in the States a few weeks ago. He was scheduled to die by lethal injection, and his veins were so bad that they couldn't do it on time. And then he died maybe a month later of whatever health problem he had.
Right, exactly. They couldn't even find a vein, and they poked at him for several hours before they finally gave up. Disability rights advocates often talk about institutions restricting the freedoms of disabled residents. Usually we're referring to nursing homes where meals, showers, and bedtimes are scheduled for the good of the facility. Prisons are worse. Besides the lack of accessibility, inmates are treated as less than human. And, you know, as bad as it is to have your wake up times and meal times and all that scheduled, you know, imagine not being able to leave your cell. And that's a little bit the difference between prison and an institution.
Yeah.
Let's see. Prison, oh yeah. Although palliative care is supposed to be available in prisons, the reality often doesn't even meet basic standards. Services are provided too late to be useful. Loved ones' visits are limited, and medical professionals often hesitate to give adequate pain medication.
Yeah, you never know. He could become an addict.
Yeah.
Hey, he's dying.
Yeah, it's silly.
Yeah, completely silly. But you know, doctors who do that job, even if outside the prison, they are reluctant to give drugs.
Right.
And in prison, it's more than be reluctant. They try not to doing at all.
Yeah. Adelina Ifteen, a prison law expert at Dalhousie University, worries that some people will choose assisted suicide as an escape from these horrible conditions. She noted that a person cannot fully consent to assisted suicide if they are pressured by external circumstances, an argument we've heard ourselves somewhere before. Yeah. We can't leave out the fact that people of color and Indigenous people are overrepresented in Canada's prison system due to the many effects of systemic racism.
Bizarre.
Right.
Both of those are a discriminated group.
Right.
Either.
Exactly. As well, prison has become the go-to residential option for people with psychiatric disabilities because mental health resources are scarce and underfunded. Assisted suicide does nothing to address these conditions.
Just recently, a study from Statistics Canada,
Right.
so it's fully scientific, said that the handicapped people are twice the marked or maltreated than any other people.
Right.
And if it's the handicap is from the brain, any kind of brain handicap, 4 times the chance to be mugged or molested.
Yeah. Okay, so assisted suicide does nothing to address these combined forms of discrimination and oppression. Instead, it is another sign of inhuman treatment being ignored. Taylor, do you want to add anything on that?
I think you summed it up.
Yeah, okay, good. So if you want information about the topics that we discuss here, you can visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/toujours vivant not dead yet, all one word. You can visit our website at tvndy.ca. You can email us at info@tv-ndy.ca, or you can follow us on Twitter @TVNDY. Thanks to Taylor for helping us out, and thanks to Christian as well.
Take care, everybody.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.